Hello and welcome to this video and to April's book review. Apologies for my voice, hopefully it's going to be okay, but I've had some weird throat thing over the last couple of days. Thank you Eloise for yet another random illness. So hopefully it's going to hold out because I have a lot to talk to you about today. So hopefully this isn't going to be too long, but I'm feeling quite yappy and a lot of books to talk to you about. So as you know, if you watched last month's book review, I'm taking part in the Spring Reading Challenge hosted by What Victoria Read, and I've made a real effort at trying to get some of these things ticked off because I really would like to finish it, but it's still up in the air. But I did read 8 books this month. They were made up of 5 physical books, 3 audio, but also 5 books off my physical and digital TBR, 1 reread, and then 2 just random picks. So I've got those to talk to you about, but I also thought, as 2 books have entered my collection this month, that I would tell you about those as well. So for Easter I got Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver from my parents. I'm aware this is number 2 in a series, so if you have read these, can you let me know if I can read them as standalones? I think they're interconnected standalones, or if I should read Wild Love first. Please let me know. And a book that I've been so excited about since it got announced, but I do paperback, not hardback, came out this month, and we went into Sainsbury's and I was like, if it's a £5 or less, I will get it, and I'm so excited. I don't know when I'm going to read it, but I want to read it right now, but because of the reading challenge I can't fit it in yet, and that's Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Very, very excited about that one. But those are the only 2 books that have entered my collection this month. I've been very restrained. Well, I haven't actually, because I bought a book and I'm trying not to buy any books until I've got rid of some of my ones anyway. Not got rid of, read some of them. Right, we better get on and talk about the 8 books that I read in April. So the first book I picked up was for the prompt animal point of view, and I listened to Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. I've had this on my Kindle for ages. In fact, when I was a kid I had a physical copy of it and I've never read it. There was something about it that just never appealed. But when that prompt came up and I looked at the books on my TBR, I was like, well, that's the only one I've got really that I can put to it. But knowing that I probably would never have read it physically, I tried to find an audiobook for it and ended up on LibriVox, which is a free audiobook thing. But it's very weird because different people read every chapter. I think I had at least 12 narrators throughout this book. It wasn't a consistent voice throughout, which was a bit weird, to be honest. And I have to say that some of the people were great. Some of the people sounded like they were using it as practice for English, so it was a bit weird. But that being said, the actual book itself I quite enjoyed. I was quite surprised about how much I enjoyed it. I ended up rating it 3.5 stars, and it was just way better than I thought it would. So obviously we are following a horse, Black Beauty, although he ends up having different names with the different people that he's with, and we go through his life basically. It's quite episodic in the way it's told, but I find that a lot of books from around that time are. So I sort of anticipated that was going to be the case. And there was a lot of emphasis on the treatment of horses and things like that, which surprised me, again from the time period, that that's where Anna Sewell took this book. I don't know if it's common at that time to have that kind of thought process about treating animals correctly and whatever, but yeah. It was a heavy theme in this book, and one that I found I quite enjoyed. I got quite attached to Black Beauty by the end of it. It was easier to follow than I thought it was going to be, but then I guess it was aimed at younger people, so maybe that's why. It did have a habit of going off in some weird tangents around politics and things like that, which wasn't my jam, but it was fine. So yeah, one that surprised me. And didn't actually mind. I'm glad I listened to it because I'm not sure how I would have fared reading it, but enjoyable enough. So that was Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. The next book I read was Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. I was determined to read this before Easter because this was my Easter present like 2 years ago, and is the oldest gift on my shelf, so I felt kind of bad that I'd left it for so long, and it fit the prompt very nicely of flowers on the cover because of these lovely daisies. For using it in a readathon it's very chunky, but hey, we've got to do these things. So this is book 1 in the Knock 'em Out series. Knock 'em Out is like a small town. This is a small town romance. We are following Knox, who has lived there most of his life. He's very grumpy, very rich. He ended up winning the lottery, and that kind of thing. And then we've got Naomi, who's a runaway bride, but she ends up in Knock 'em Out because of her twin sister, who is up to no good and ends up being left her niece to look after. And we're following their romance, but there's a lot of other factors in this book, like the odd sort of mystery kind of element into it and stuff like that, certainly around her twin and that kind of thing. And I found I quite enjoyed it. I actually gave this 4.5 stars. I'm not sure if I was over generous with it because it hasn't massively stayed with me, but my reading experience of it was good. I found that when I was reading it I wanted to carry on. I found it quite hard to put my bookmark back in and put it down and go to sleep, and for me that's a sign of a good book. I found that both Knox and Naomi were like extremes of their trope and their type in a romance book, which kind of frustrated me slightly because they didn't need to be quite so extreme. I know I've already used that word, but that's the only one I can think of. There could have been a bit more nuance to them and that kind of thing. And especially with Knox, because he says some stuff that I just think is vile, but he gets away with it because of the type that he is. And I wouldn't have got on with him, and I wouldn't have stuck around to wait for him and all that kind of stuff, even if he is really beautiful or whatever. The secondary characters probably made this for me. I particularly liked the niece. She was called Leigh, and she came out with some fun stuff. I liked that. I liked Sloane, and I found that Nash was probably a more interesting brother to me. I think his is the next book, but the character that they've like put him with, I just don't get it. I don't see it. I would read the next book in this. I think it's a trilogy, but I'm not gonna like put myself out there to find it. If it happens to fall into my lap reasonably cheap or whatever, then yeah, I would pick it out because I did enjoy it, and I did really enjoy Lucy Score's writing, so I would be open to reading more from her. But I do think it was probably too long, but as I say, when I was reading it I wanted to keep going, so I don't know how that one fares. But yeah, surprised, slightly annoyed that I left it for so long on my shelf, because I did really enjoy it. It was a fun read. It has opened me to another author that I can explore. So yeah, that's Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. Following that was my reread, and I read Girls Out Late by Jacqueline Wilson. Again, if you followed for the last couple of months, you'll know that I'm rereading the Girls series, and then I think it's probably June that I'll get to the adult sequel to this. But I wanted to reread all of these to remind myself of the characters and what went on and that kind of stuff. So we are back with Ellie and her friends Magda and Nadine. In this one, Ellie finds a boyfriend, and it's all about, you know, breaking curfew and that kind of thing. I should add that I added this to the prompt of continue a series, and I gave it 3.5 stars, which is what I've given the other ones. However, the ending of this is so strange. As a parent reading it, very uncomfortable. Really hope that my daughter is far more intelligent to get herself into that situation. It's also incredibly rushed. I think I said this about some of the other ones, certainly Girls Under Pressure, where it's like they get into this like scrape and then, well, it's done, it's fine. And it's like, no, that's too much, that's too rushed. It's nice to see that Ellie found someone in this, because that's been a sort of theme throughout, I still think they're written too young for the audience that they're aimed for, but I did like the fact that this one explored more about sort of friendships when you've got in a relationship and how those can be a bit competing sometimes, and it was good to explore that. But yeah, it's also interesting to see teenage life without a mobile phone, because I was on the cusp. I was actually quite late to get a mobile phone. Everybody else had one, but I didn't get mine until I was about 16, and even then it was a brick compared to everybody else's. I was very excited when I got my first mobile. It's the same when I got MSN. I was quite late to that one too. I was very excited when I could join in that as well. But it was interesting reading a teenage life without a mobile, and I feel like that would be the thing that would make these not relatable to the audience that it's going for now in today's day and age. But yeah, 3.5, carrying on with the series. If I remember rightly, Russell, I think that's the name of the boyfriend, ends up being a bit odd. But we've got Girls in Tears to go next month, so we'll see. Book number, what are we on? 4, I think, and I gave it 4 stars, was my pick for a non-fiction, because I felt that was going to be a good one to listen to on audio, so I listened to Roaring Girls by Kyte, and this was narrated by, sorry, I grabbed my phone, narrated by Helen Keeley. So in this, Kyte explores 8 pioneering women, and how they sort of changed society and led the way to like feminism and all of that kind of stuff, and equality, and sort of pushing the boundaries. I really enjoyed this. Certainly the beginning and the end had some really interesting facts about life in general, not just about particular stories. There was one about how many women were unmarried for whatever reason, which surprised me in that sort of day and age. So the fact that they were only really classed as complete if they had a man and they had no rights and stuff was surprising, and all of that kind of thing, because we're looking at sort of 17th to 19th century for these women. But I will say that some of the stories themselves were more interesting than others. So we started off with Mary Frith, who I really liked. She's also known as Mole Cut Purse, and her story was fascinating. The way that she got herself through things was very interesting. We then had a bit of a lull with the people. I didn't find the next 2-3 particularly interesting. We got to Anne Lister, who's known as Gentleman Jack. It's a person that I know a little bit about, so I added to my knowledge of that, so that was interesting, and again just an interesting character. And then the last one was Caroline Norton, who I hadn't heard of, I don't think, but she was like crucial in getting like custody rights for women and that kind of stuff, and being a mum and that kind of thing. I'm not expecting and I'm not hoping to be in that kind of situation, but to think that just because she'd split up with her husband, who was horrible and violent and that kind of stuff, that meant she could never see her kids again, despite the fact that he didn't care about them at all. He just shipped them off somewhere. But because he was spiteful meant that she couldn't see them either, and because of society and all of that kind of stuff. So I found those were probably the most interesting stories. So there was probably 3 that I really liked, 2 that I thought were fine, and then 3 that I thought were a little bit dull. There was a lot of just she wore men's clothing, which I know at the time was a big thing, but to listen to over and over again got a little bit tedious. I would recommend this book. It was very, very interesting, and the audiobook is great for it, but it is covering 8 people's lives, stories, so there are going to be some that appeal more than others for that one. So yeah, 4 stars for that. The reason I picked that up was A, because it was available on my library app, but also Victoria, person hosting the readathon, has mentioned it and talked about it, so I thought, do you know what, that's quite fitting, so that's why I used that as my non-fiction prompt. I moved around with my next one because it was disabled rep. I have Out on a Limb, and that was going to be my thing, but I'm also really conscious that I want to read some of the gifts that I've been given, and that didn't cover it. So I was having a look at my spreadsheet, because I'm sad and I have a spreadsheet, about what books had been gifted to me and what I could use. and realised that maybe In Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid would fit this prompt. Might be a little bit of a spoiler, so apologies, but in this we are following our main character Hannah, who's a bit down on her luck and ends up going back to LA. When she's there, like, one of the first things that she does is go on this night out to, you know, see her friends again, and her like school boyfriend, they ended up splitting up and whatever, comes and he asks her to stay. So we then split into two timelines, one where she stays in the nightclub, bar, whatever with him, and one where she doesn't and she goes home with her friends, and how her life unfolds because of that one decision. Think sliding doors. And in one of those timelines there is a lot of disabled rep in it. Taylor Jenkins Reid, I think, is probably one of my absolute favourite authors, as you've already heard. I'm very excited about Atmosphere. I'm also trying to read her backlist, which is one of this one. This is one of my least favourite Taylor Jenkins Reids, probably, ish, but I still gave it 4.5 stars, so that says the calibre of her writing. I just think she writes the best characters and sort of moulds the best stories and things like that. I've read a couple of novels where they do alternative lives and they're normally really similar, but these felt really distinct in their own way, but then there were little things that overlapped, which I just thought was very clever. I'm going to say something now that is a spoiler, so if you are planning on reading this, then please skip ahead. I just want to talk about the ending of this book, and I know that it's possible that there are people that have this on their TBR and don't want to know, so if you don't, please skip ahead until I'm holding up another book. But if you are interested, right, let's give them a moment. Right, I really liked the ending of this. As I said, in a lot of the sort of alternate timeline books that I've read, the endings basically mean that they're the same and they end with the same person and all of that kind of stuff. I love that in these two timelines they're different. Although it is still a happy ending in both, the endings are different, and I really found that great. That's such a refreshing way of looking at this kind of novel, which I haven't read before. I would say that because of the way it's written, it can be a little bit confusing sometimes on which timeline you're in, but I read them basically, I felt like one chapter was a section from each, and then I always knew that I was starting with this timeline. I'd read that one and then I could put my bookmark in. I never stopped in a different place basically, and that prevented it being confusing for me, because there is nothing to determine in this book that it's something else other than the events that happen in them. The friendship and found family in this is like second to none, and because of that I also questioned some of the decisions that Hannah's parents made earlier on, like off page for this novel, but it was an odd choice that they made. So yeah, as I say, really enjoyed this one, probably my favourite of the month, and although not my favourite Taylor Jenkins Reid, still a really solid book and one that I enjoyed. So that's maybe In Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So the next book is my third and final audiobook, and I went on my library app to look at what they had available for that I could use for queer rep, and what came up was I don't know what the series is called, it's got Heated Rivalry in it. I did consider doing that one, but thought, do you know what, I'm a bit of a completionist, so I'll start with book one. So I read Game Changer by Rachel Reid, and this was narrated by Tor Tom, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and I gave this 3.5 stars. This is a male-male hockey romance. So our hockey player is Scott. He is like head honcho in whatever team he was in, the Admirals, and he meets Kip, who is a barista essentially. Do they call them baristas if they make smoothies? He works in a smoothie shop and makes smoothies, and that's the relationship. I can't say I fully believed in their relationship. These books are like steamy to another level. in the fact that they start exploring each other in probably chapter 5, and I don't think there's many chapters after that that doesn't have something in that vein for the rest of the book. It's about 30 chapters long, and pretty much all of them, maybe a few towards the end, don't. So yeah, there's a lot of that in it, and they don't seem to talk to each other, so this is why I don't fully believe in their relationship, because I don't see how they know each other very well, because they're always a bit preoccupied with other things, shall we say. Have I said I gave it 3.5 stars? But that's partly because it did make me laugh in places. It was a very easy listen, although I would say that the narrator's vocal choices for Kip maybe made me laugh a bit too much at points, because it was weird. And as I said, there's a lot of sex scenes in it, and the way he talks in those is just odd and a little bit uncomfortable at times. I don't think that I don't mind a bit of spice in my romance books, but when they take it too far, that's one thing when you're reading it, but then when you're listening to it, adds a whole other layer to it that just trying to walk the dog and I've got this going on in my ears is I'm a bit worried that other people are going to catch on and stuff. But maybe I'm a bit of a prude, so what can I say about that? But yeah, it did make me laugh kind of at points. The third act I quite enjoyed because essentially Scott is in the closet, so it's exploring all of that. So it made it way more believable than a lot of third acts that I've read in romance books. The other thing I queried was, if a man had written a sapphic romance, would it be quite as popular? Because there's something about a woman writing a male-male romance that I didn't know whether I should be for or not. I understand her choices of writing the series. She's apparently a big hockey fan and there's a lot of homophobia in it. So she wanted to sort of write a book in that world to try and tackle that a little bit, and that I appreciate. But a woman writing a male-male romance, would we be quite as on board with it if it was a man writing a female-female romance? Do you get where I'm going with this? I don't know. Please put your comments in the box below. I'd be interested to know what other people think on that. But yeah, 3.5 stars. Would be interested in listening to some of the others. As I said, I know there's heated rivalry on my library app too, so maybe I'll delve into that at some point. That's a really bad choice of word for the kind of book it is. But yeah, 3.5. Game Changer by Rachel Starr. Game Changer by Rachel Reid. The 7th book that I had, I told you this was going to be a long video, sorry. If you're still here, thank you. I've only got 2 more to go. The 7th book that I read was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I read this on my Kindle, and it was the book chosen for the chapter a day challenge group that my book club does, like wider nationwide book club, and I had it on my Kindle and on a whim decided to do it, but I don't think that format works for me at all. I don't think I work very well with the chapter a day style of it, but I did enjoy having a Kindle book that I just left downstairs, so you know, if I got a bit fed up of Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, I could delve into my book. If I had like 5 minutes between meetings, I could read a little bit of my book. So that part of it I liked. I just didn't quite gel with the chapter a day, or maybe it's just because it was this book. Because Ninth House, we are following Alex Stern, and she is essentially overseeing secret societies in Yale University. It's basically a dark academia paranormal mystery, I guess, and that's why I put it to the prompt of out of my comfort zone, because all of those words put together just isn't something I would normally read or pick up. I don't even know why I had it on my Kindle, to be honest. I must have picked it up at some point thinking, oh yeah, that sounds interesting, but it surprises me. But anyway, I gave it 3.5 stars in the end. I'm not 100% sure I understood everything that happened in the book, but I would be open to reading the other one, so it can't have been that bad. I would say for good chunk at the beginning I was just massively confused, and the like Discord group, everyone seemed to be in the same boat, but I will say it does come together, so I suppose that confusion at the beginning just fed into the mystery part of it. Again, it's done in sort of dual timeline-ish. We had sort of flashbacks to Alex of the past, but also there's a character called Darlington and something happens with him, so we have flashbacks before that event happens. I don't know whether it's the book or the way I read it, but a lot of it confused me. But I do think I got the gist of it by the end, although I'm not 100% sure, as I say. It is quite dark. I wasn't expecting it to be quite so brutal at points, and to be honest, I don't think I was expecting it to have paranormal elements in it, but I obviously went into this very blind and didn't know anything about it, so I felt that our main character Alex didn't really catch a break very often, and I think she could have done with slightly less trauma. I don't think we needed quite so much for her, but I'm not an author, so what do I know. It is a bit slow and dense in parts, as I said. There are a lot of secret societies that you have to try and get your head around, so there's a lot of sort of explaining that somehow, but once you get through that beginning third probably, it does pick up and you do start to get trickles of like answers, but then they make more questions. That's what I mean by I'm not 100% sure if I understood it. But I was intrigued throughout, so I guess that's a bonus for it. So yeah, Ninth House, 3.5 stars. Similar to Lucy's score. If the next one happens to be in my possession at some point, then cool, but I'm not going to search for it, and I really dislike the cover of this, and the next one to be fair, but this one particularly because I don't like snakes. So yeah, Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. And we've made it. So the last book that I read in April for the prompt seasonal read was The Strawberry Patch Pancake House. So this is book 4 in the Dream Harbour series, and one that I just thoroughly enjoy. I like being with the Dream Harbour lot. I want to live in Dream Harbour. It seems like a very nice place. I gave this one 4 stars, which I think I've probably given all of them, but I have to say this is up there as my favourite. I don't know if it overtakes the Pumpkin Spice Cafe. It might do, but I'm not sure. So in this one we are following, well, this is Iris's story, so she's appeared in some of the other books, but mainly we're following Archer, who is new to town because he has found out that he now has custody of a 5-year-old daughter. So this is a single dad romance. I don't think I've read that often, but it is a trope that I quite enjoyed, so I would be open to reading more single dad romances, because they do discuss it in the book. I quite like the addition of a child because I think they add this whole other aspect to it. Similar again to the Lucy Score book, I just think the child comes out with some of the funniest lines, and also by having a child it's a bit harder for them to keep writing sex scenes and spice scenes, so I appreciate that this is very limited on the spice compared to most of the other Dream Harbour books, but that worked better for me. So as I say, easy read. A lot of people call it a palette cleanser, but I don't think that's very fair on authors' works by doing that, but it is one that you don't have to expend a lot of brain power on. And as I say, I enjoy Iris as a character. Olive comes out with some great things, which is the kid. There's some really good descriptions of pancakes in here that made me hungry at points. I will say there was a turn at the end that I don't think was needed. I don't think just because it's a single dad romance that ending was particularly necessary, but I'm not mad at it. I didn't dislike it, I just think it was a bit unnecessary. I think the next one's being released this month, but I only have one more to go for me, and then we'll have to think about getting that. But I thought it fit the old spring vibes well. Very much enjoyed the sprayed edges of this one. Very pretty book, aesthetically. and I enjoyed the contents of it. So 4 stars for The Strawberry Patch Pancake House by Laurie Gilmore. And there we have it. That is the 8 books that I have read this month. I am trying to complete the challenge. I have another 10 prompts to complete though, and the books that I've earmarked for it are quite short. By and large, there are 2 chunky ones in there though, and I have factored in some audio and all of that kind of stuff, but I think it means that I have to read 65 pages a day, which is doable, and I am going on holiday and that tends to mean I read a little bit more, so we'll see. I'm rambling now and you don't need to, you know, work out my reading logistics with me, but I am going to really attempt to try and finish this reading challenge in May. So if you're interested in that, please click the subscribe button. If you've enjoyed this one, and thank you if you've got this to this point, please give it a thumbs up, and if you've got any comments on what I've been talking about or can see any books here that you think I should read instantly, put them in the box below and I will see you in the next one. Bye!